Welcome, everyone, to the Man in Search of Gold podcast. I'm your host, Eric Mangold, and I'm the founder of Argosy Wealth Management. This is the show where we share ideas, strategies, and history to help you improve your life one financial move at a time. Let's get started. Yeah, we're live. Hey, everybody. Eric Mangold back, Man in Search of Gold podcast. This is episode 7. We're getting there, and we're getting increasing on the views too, which is exciting. The number of views just haven't been my mom and my brother. So tonight we're blessed with Dr. Brian Cohen to come on. I'm gonna do a little bio on Dr. Cohen. So he's an orthopedic surgeon with over 25 years of experience. But he views himself as a builder and a storyteller. As a surgeon, he takes ownership of every patient's journey, the triumphs, the complications, the lessons learned along the way. As an innovator, he refuses to accept the status quo in healthcare, and he drives ventures that are reimagining the patient experience, strengthening the tendon-to-bone healing, and redesign facilities that put people first. As a mentor, and listen, everybody needs a great mentor, but as a mentor, I believe culture cannot be faked, and leadership is measured by how well we lift others. And I think that's an amazing mission statement, and no matter what field that you're in. He shares openly the scars, setbacks, and successes because authenticity builds trust and storytelling connects us all. His purpose is to empty the tank each day to champion innovations that transform how we heal and to invest in the next generation so they surpass us in life and profession. His legacy is not just in surgeries performed, but in lives impacted, teams strengthened, and children inspired to dream bigger than he ever did. And one of the things that I thought was really cool is that he gives his cell phone to all of his patients. So Dr. Cohen, thank you and welcome to the show.
Eric, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So let's get off with the basics. So where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Long Island, New York. I'm the middle of two brothers. I guess the big thing for me was that my dad, we lived in Long Island. My dad worked in Manhattan as a pharmacist, and he would commute. And if you're familiar with, he would go with the commute, take about 2 hours to get to work. And he would read the entire New York Times on his way to work. He'd have that thing splayed out. If you remember the New York Times, it's not just it's like a fold over and, it's like it's like the steering wheel and the passenger seat. But he would read the entire thing. And I remember when I was in med school and he would take me back, because I went to med school in the city, and he would take me into the city sometimes, and I'd sit in the car, and I was just amazed at the patience he had to just do that. And then I realized early on that he didn't like his job. He did it because it supported his family. And I always say this, and I feel terrible for saying it. I feel like in one day of my job, I probably had more happiness and return than he had in his entire career. And I respect him for doing something that wasn't his first probably top 10 choices, but he did it because that's what he did.
Yeah. So now when did you start feeling like the path was going to be medicine for you?
In my school where I grew up in Long Island, kids from my side of the street didn't do shop. We played sports, and we did, the shop was for the guys who didn't play sports, I guess. And whether that was perceived or reality, that's just how it felt. But I loved cars. So when I was a senior in high school, I had a Triumph TR6. So it's a British car. It's breaking down every, 50 miles. So I would be changing spark plugs and doing, changing tires and changing oil and just trying to manage it. And I just enjoyed doing those things. So I always knew I wanted to do something with my hands. And then I was better in the math and sciences than I was in social studies or English. So that kind of pushed me towards medicine. When I went to med school, I realized I was going to be a surgeon. And the story that really got me into orthopedics was I was in the general surgery operating room with my chief resident, who I looked up to and was somebody that, was a true mentor. And we're in a case, and the general surgeon is running the bowel, and he turns to George, who is the chief resident. He goes, "George, Dr. Cohen is going to be a very famous dermatologist." Yeah. You don't have to be a surgeon to realize that that's not a compliment. And look, George is one of those guys that, he can do things, and he doesn't, where he didn't just say, "I agree." He just said, no. He goes, "Dr. Cohen's going to be a famous surgeon." And I respected him stepping up for me. But then Fast forward a few months and I'm in the orthopedic operating room, and Scotty Orkin, who was the chief resident at the time, is dancing to Whoop There It Is during a total knee. And I'm like, this is the room I want to be in. I just got to figure out how to get here. So, with the sports background and just that vibe, I just knew that I wanted to be a surgeon and that orthopedics was where I wanted to be.
Always ask this because I always find it fascinating for someone that's not in medicine. But the first time you saw, a live patient, scalpel to skin, blood, like, was it exhilarating, scary, all the above? Like, what's that feeling like?
The thing about it is that, we get our first exposure in anatomy, to the cadaver.
Yeah,
So we dissect cadavers first before we actually get into the real life situation.
it's not a live
It's a
body
live
though.
body, but it's not, there's no blood. It's
Yeah,
and I believe, and this goes back, geez, I went to med school in 1990, so probably 91. I think I was the first one to make the incision on our anatomy patient at the time. But the thing about surgery is that when you're in the operating room, the sterile field is such a constricted portion of the patient. So you don't see their body. You don't see their body. You just either see their knee or you see their shoulder. So it's really very focused. So I never got turned off by it. It was always something that was, what are we doing? What are we trying to figure out? So it was always a positive experience.
so, and then you bring up an interesting point. So when you're the head surgeon, and is it you set the temperature, you set the music, you set, is it that's your world kind of thing, and everybody's
So if you asked my former self 20 years ago, yeah, that was it. I set the temperature. I don't care what Jaco says the temperature should be in the operating room. We're going down as low as we can. If we're listening to Howard Stern in the morning, we're listening to hip hop in the afternoon. That's how it is. Um, we were just talking about this today. I remember we were operating, and not only did we listen to hip hop or some not the average music that people would listen to in the operating room, but it was always very loud. And I remember the the general surgeon in the room next door came in during the middle of my case and turned my music off. And he said, Dr. Cohen, your music is so loud, I cannot keep my hands straight. The bass is rocking the table. And I just said, and like I said, 20 years ago, that's who I was. Now I'm much different. I follow rules. I realized, following rules, you get a lot further in life than if you try to. I mean, there's a temperature rule for a reason. So I don't even talk about the temperature. If it's a little warm, then and I sweat a little bit during the case, I'll change my scrubs or something. And then as far as the music goes, I let the staff pick the music. As far as I'm concerned, the focus is the patient. And not that it wasn't before, but I guess when I was younger, I was able to focus on a lot of different things. Now I'm just like, okay, we're here for this patient, this knee. Let's get this done. Let's do it without interruption. If there's going to be music in the background, that's fine. The only time I'll say something is like when we're hearing the same song for like the seventh time in a row. And it's like, okay, can we just like make it a little adjustment? I'm not going to tell you what to put on. Just put on something else you like. Yeah. So
different.
it's changed over the years, but you realize that the important things are the patient and what we're trying to accomplish. And when you first come out, you just realize that, wow, I'm in charge. And it's a scary feeling. I remember my first case, we had a femur fracture that came in through the ER, and it was a really hard reduction. You realize that the attending, and back then it was either Ed Yang from when I was at Mount Sinai, Ed Yang, who was our trauma guy, or Elton Strauss, who would come in and do some quick maneuver and everything would line up perfectly. And you just realize that they're not coming through the door. It's like it's you. And if it takes
It's
you
you.
5 minutes, it takes you 5 minutes. If it takes you 5 hours, it's going to take you 5 hours. So just get it done. Yeah.
I want to come back to some of that, but now school or
Yep.
home in Long Island, and then where does your
I did
undergrad?
undergrad at Binghamton. Yeah.
Binghamton. Okay, and then good pre-med program at
Yeah. It was
Binghamton.
good.
Okay,
I mean, it was standard. I mean, everybody gets scared of organic chemistry. Genetics kicked my ass. It's how it is. But my first choice was like an Ivy League school. And then I realized, being in New York State school obviously is a lot cheaper. I figured I'd pay more for my med school than I would for my college. I'm going to walk out with a ton of loans anyway. So I might as well, go to a better med school, in my opinion. Then Binghamton was good. I mean, I made lifelong friends there. So I think that's what you look back at, what made college good. Obviously, did you have a good time and did you meet good people? But when you walk away and you pick up your phone, 20 years later, are there people in there that you talk to or communicate with that you went to college with. And there are, there's about 5 or 6 guys that we don't see each other, but we jump on whenever it's a birthday or something like that. So I think that's a positive result.
Definitely. I have a senior right now.
Yeah,
The education is very important, but it's the people that you meet that when you're 15, 20 years down the road, these are some of your lifelong
I
best
agree.
friends, and that's super important. So then where are we off to for
So
med school?
med school, I went back to New York. I went to Mount Sinai. So I did Mount Sinai, which is on the Upper East Side. So great place to go to anything, right in the heart of Manhattan, as far as I'm concerned, Upper East Side. So med school
Yep.
and then residency. So I was 9 years on the Upper East Side, and it was, it was also, actually one of my closest friends. We went from college to med school together, and then we lived together. It's the nice thing about Mount Sinai is that it wasn't the tests were like batched towards the end of each half or quarter or whatever semester. So you can like goof off for the first 3 or 4 weeks and then you just cram your studying in. So we would go out, Friday, Saturday, every weekend for 3 weeks in a row. And then the last 2 weeks, buckle down and study. So, and obviously there's no problem going out in New York.
Yeah, that's an easy thing to do, right? And then okay, so after med school and residency, then
So
where are we
in
off to?
1999, I took a position as a sports fellow at Rush in Chicago. So a sports medicine fellowship for a year, 1999 to 2000. And then, and also, great training. We didn't take care of teams, but we got a lot of experience. Probably one of the top programs now as far as sports medicine in the country. Back then, it was a great program, but obviously, it just keeps getting better and better.
How'd you like being in
Chicago's a
Chicago?
good town. I mean, I have no complaints.
Yeah,
I would equate it to like a section of New York. It doesn't compare to
yeah,
all of New York, where if you go down to the Village, you get a different experience versus Hell's Kitchen or the Upper East Side. It's probably more Upper East Side ish. Some Village type places in and around Chicago, but the for the most part, I'd say it's like more of like an Upper East Side feel.
so then fellowship there, and then after fellowship,
Yeah,
where were
so
your
around Christmas time, 1999, going into 2000, I get a cold call from a headhunter that's looking for 2 orthopedic surgeons to start a practice in Chillicothe. Now, Chillicothe, Ohio is the first and third capital of Ohio. Columbus is now the capital of Ohio. So I don't know what happened. I don't know who the second is, and I don't know how they lost the first time and how they lost it again. But it was the first and third capital. And then the opportunity was a great opportunity. It was a health system that an orthopedic group had recently built a surgery center that was supposed to be a joint venture with the health system. The health system decided that they didn't need more operating rooms. The orthopedic group said, we're going to do it anyway. And then they pulled out all of their cases, and they were the only orthopedic group in that facility. Anything that was ambulatory orthopedics was pulled out. So the hospital was in a financial, uh, tough situation. So they were looking for 2 orthopedic surgeons to start a practice. They were going to employ them. And back then they were guaranteeing, $320,000 a year, which was great money back then. It's, half of, or probably less than half of what they guarantee now. But back then when you went to med school and, you went to med school on the government, and then, I went to med school on the government, and then residency, I'm making $30,000 a year. It's like, I'll go anywhere for $320,000. I
yeah,
figured that
yeah,
I would do that for a couple of years and then move on. I had opportunities in other places. But what happened was, it's just, the people, it was just a great place. I just really enjoyed the people I took care of. My partner left in 2004, and I looked and I was thinking, okay, this is a good time to transition back to New York or back to Chicago. And I looked at this, back then we were doing paper charts, and I looked at this room full of paper charts, and I was like, all these charts are people. And the other group in town did not see anybody who was seen by another or was treated by another orthopedic surgeon. So I was like, all these people would have to go somewhere else. So I just made a decision that I wasn't going to just leave. I wasn't going to abandon them. And I just started hiring people.
yeah.
And so in 2004, in March 2004, I was by myself as an orthopedic surgeon. In 2020, when I left that facility, I had grown it to 30 plus providers. And the health system had taken my recommendation that I had asked them to do over the years to build a $70 million orthopedic hospital. So, yeah, so it was, and that's all amazing. And it was really, a very inspiring and very rewarding growth over the years. But what's more rewarding is, I take care of kids, I take care of their parents, I take care of their grandparents. I mean, there's one family that I could recall. I think I replaced the two brothers' ACLs, the mother's ACL, replaced the grandfather's hip, and it's just, it's just nice to have that community.
Take me back to 1999. So you get the opportunity in Ohio, and it's you and your partner, and you're going out there. Now, when you go out there to start the practice, did you have to learn to say, okay, you know what? These are the things I need to be successful out here, whether it comes to people or equipment or vendors or med device reps? Like, did you have an idea, or were you kind of like, all right, we're starting from
Well,
scratch
I
here?
mean, I would say that, for me, the operating room was obviously something that I was more comfortable in saying, this is what I need. When it came to the office, you and I talked about this before. I have no clue. In med school, we have little office work that we do, very little. I mean, but it's not only about the business side, it's also about the follow-up side. We would see some follow-up, but we would never see a totally 6 months, that we did. No, we would never see a year follow-up. So yeah, it's a lot of on-the-job learning, and just fortunately, there are people that are more experienced. And I learned a long time ago that the things I know, I'll give my opinion on. The things I don't know, I'm going to trust people who have that expertise. So on the office side, I would say I was as close to lost as you could be. And on the operative side, I would say that I knew who I liked, what companies I like to work with. And, it was just a matter of, getting that all up and running.
Yeah. Okay. And then when your partner left, were you like, okay, you're now on your own? Was it like, all right, this is now a stress to you? Was it exciting for you then to
It,
be like running the show? Well, you guess you were running the
yeah,
show anyway, but now
Yeah, it
even more
wasn't,
so.
the nice thing about my relationship with my first partner is that we split everything 50-50. So he was more business savvy. So he understood a lot of the stuff that I just never, and I don't know where he picked it up. I mean, he trained in New York and at Lenox Hill. I trained at Sinai, but he knew a lot of the business side, and I like to operate. So even if I did 100 more cases than him, we still split everything 50-50. So he was picking up some of the slack on the business side, and I was picking some, but once again, we're employed at this point. So we're really not flying solo. We do have a very strong net. But when he left, it was more of, okay, how am I going to take care of all these people in the time frame that's reality? And what we did was we did late night clinics, and we operated late, and we just did it. It was one of those things where I knew that there was help on the way. We had signed a spine surgeon, we had signed a total joint surgeon, but they weren't starting for about 8 to 10 months. And they're both coming out of training, so they were going to need lead time. They weren't going to be able to walk in the door and be like, okay, this is how I did it for the last 10 years at my other practice. It was just, so I
Yeah.
would say it was about a year before they were fully up and running, by the time from when he left till they were up and running. But yeah, it's one of those things where you don't know what you can do until you're forced to do it, and you just do it.
Yeah. Okay. So then how long was it before he left? And then you
So
had
I
that $70 million.
so he left in 2004. They broke ground in
Okay.
2019. So 50.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Long time between that. Okay. But then in the meantime, you're now bringing on
Yeah,
new
so the one
providers.
thing that,
So do you,
and I'm not going to say that I invented this or I thought it up, but I just really valued it, was I like to operate. So the best way to operate more is to have people who see patients who can't operate. So what we did was we hired all the subspecialties. So we had a foot and ankle surgeon, we had a hand surgeon, we had a spine surgeon, we had a total joint surgeon, we had a sports medicine surgeon, we had a hand surgeon. So once we had all those subspecialties covered, instead of bringing on another total joint surgeon, we started hiring non-operative sports medicine doctors. So in a town of 23,000, but we covered an area of 450,000. We had 8 non-operative sports medicine doctors, and they would go out to these different clinics that we had throughout the Southern Ohio, and they would basically triage patients to the appropriate surgeon. So if there was a non-operative treatment that was appropriate, they would do that and discharge the patient. But if they needed a wrist fracture, they would send it to the hand surgeon. If they had an ACL tear, they'd send it to me. If it was a total knee, they'd send it to somebody else. So, but that way, we just increased the volume of people that got to us and I always use the ratio of, when I started, probably 20% of the people I saw were surgical candidates. And then when we had all these non-operative doctors basically seeing people initially, it was about 80% of the patients I saw were surgical candidates.
Just everything became so
Yeah,
much more
yeah, and
efficient.
that's the way. And
Yeah.
for a health system, if I inject a knee, it costs X. A non-operative sports medicine injects a knee, doesn't cost X. It costs less than X. So it actually saves them on some of these procedures where they would make a higher return on because it's still billed the same, but the payment to the
Yeah.
physician is less.
It's interesting. I try not to get into like the status of the healthcare system in the United States, but it's interesting hearing your system because it sounds super,
Yeah, and
super efficient for
well,
everybody, including the
and
patient.
access is the key. My motto has been for the last probably 15 years, same day, next day. If you got a problem, I don't believe in this. I get people who walk in and say, I saw this doctor and he can get me in, or I called his office, he could get me in 3 weeks. And I'm like, well, your shoulder's broken. You can't wait 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, it's like halfway healed. It's like you need to be taken care of like yesterday. Or, I need my knee replaced and I went to this doctor and he could get me in December. And I'm like, well, I mean, if you need it replaced and we'll get you next week. I mean,
Well, okay, so that brings up an interesting point because, obviously there's only so many hours in the day. I mean, yeah, I guess you have to kind of do that within reason because it's not like, right? Because I mean, that's pretty awesome. That sounds pretty like can be
yeah.
stressful for
And,
you.
so I run a Saturday clinic, so
Okay.
which is very helpful to see people, especially now during football season, all these athletes that are getting injured. It's a good play. It's easier for them to get access. They don't have to wait till Monday. And then
Yeah.
the other thing is that
Especially in Ohio, a lot of
yeah,
football in
football
Ohio.
is king. But the other thing that for me, I operate Monday, Tuesday, Friday every week. And then every other week I operate Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So I really try to have a lot of operative availability so that if a patient walks in and needs something done, there's usually time available. But if it needs to go, then I mean, unfortunately, some things just need to go. Like we had a kid today that we did that fractured. I think he turned 14 today. It was his birthday today, but he fractured his shoulder, and yeah,
Birthday?
and it needed to go. So we just added on to the schedule.
Okay. Okay. That's awesome. I mean, I speak from personal experience. I tore my pec on New Year's Eve this past year, and I was working out with my son, and the the guys that I knew, they were like, well, we can get you in 4 weeks and get you in 6 weeks kind of thing. And then a friend of a friend said, well, there's a guy that I work with who did my shoulder. He can see you tomorrow. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah,
I'll
and
go see him
and to
tomorrow.
be honest
And
with
it
you,
was,
a pec injury is not something that you want to start going after 4 weeks after. That scars in and the muscle
nah,
and I tore my triceps in 2020, and I remember that that cramping of that muscle is just it's worse than the injury.
yeah. Yeah. So I was definitely great. And also because it was one of the things where it was like, all right, the sooner I get it fixed, the sooner I can get back to life
Right,
as I know it kind of
and
thing too.
and
So,
I
I mean,
agree, and
that's,
especially these young kids who get hurt playing sports, that mental impact it has on their psyche, and then they're waiting to be treated. Is that it can be as damaging as the actual injury, and that's why I'm very much like, I mean, with everybody, I really try to be very not. I don't want to say aggressive. I try to be just get them treated, so that they can recover, like
yeah,
you said, because you can't start healing mentally until you have the treatment. Whatever it is, if it's physical therapy, you don't know until you go to the doctor and he says, this is what we think you should do. But specifically when you tore your ACL and you're sitting for 3 weeks waiting to see a surgeon, and then he's telling you it's going to be another couple of weeks. I mean, that's 6 weeks that you sat that you could have already been, and you're mentally not moving forward.
yeah. And my middle son's a teenager, and one of his friends just blew out his tore his meniscus playing hockey. For boys especially, like boys can't sit still. You can't say that do nothing. Oh, the longer you tell them to do nothing, the
I
more
agree.
insane they're gonna go. Yeah, so that's really awesome because I think that's more the exception
Yeah,
than the
and
rule.
like I said, it goes back to what you said. I give my patients my cell phone number. I just don't want to be answering a question, you know, 2 hours after they asked it. You know what I'm saying? They call they call a
Yeah.
service. By the time the service figures out who they're supposed to call, and by the time they track down the doctor, if they have my cell phone number, they get an answer immediately because it's coming to me eventually. So I might as well. get it right away.
Yeah.
We can address the
Yeah.
problem. And, if it's 5 o'clock, I could get you to somewhere, where you need to be seen. But if it's 7 or 8 o'clock, then it's we're talking about, okay, where are we going to go? We're going to go to the ER. What are we going to do to handle this? So,
How did the evolution happen of where, okay, so you're from 2004, your partner leaves, but you're bringing on providers, practice is growing, 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 and then you're thinking, okay, we can go bigger and we can go better and we can help more people if we put together a surgical center. Talked about that
one
evolution.
of our biggest competitors was Columbus.
Okay.
And, one of the facilities up there was a specialty hospital, which has been, the data shows that specialty hospitals have better patient experiences, better outcomes, better employee experience, just because it's a focused environment, kind of everybody pulling in the
Hmm.
same direction. And the patients feel that. So that was the goal. How do we compete with these facilities in other areas that we're losing business to, even though we're doing great? And that was the answer. We build a specialty hospital, we get the focus, we pull our orthopedic cases out of our main operating room and focus it into a specialty center, so that when patients walk in, they feel like, oh wow, this is really just for my right knee. It just feels them. Um,
Yeah.
so that was the goal. And at the time there was $80 million of commercial business driving by in orthopedics. So even though we're doing well, there's still a ton of business. The amount of business that drove by that facility, if it stopped across the street, would equal the amount of business that we were getting at our facility. So it was 100% additional business that we were just not getting.
How long did it take for you to say, okay, this is the dream, and then before the shovel hit the dirt to
Well,
start
I
that
started talking about the
facility?
dream in 2007. Yeah. Oh, and we
Okay.
had
Okay.
plans. We had, they were going to renovate one of the buildings and, move doors, and then the market crashed at the end of 2007. They said,
Yeah.
we got no money, So, and I understood, but we got close. We got close.
Yeah.
We had some renderings. It looked pretty sharp. And then, the bottom fell out, and then we kind of orthopedics took a back seat to, okay, we need a cancer center. We need to renovate the ER. We need to purchase this critical access hospital. And look, I'm a good soldier. I'm a team player,
Yeah.
but so, I waited and I waited, and finally they came and they said, it's time. It's time.
What year?
I would say it was
What
in
year?
2017. The previous COO came back as the CEO, and I had known him when he was the COO 10 years prior, and he saw the vision. He understood the potential that a facility like that would have for the system downstream. And that's kind of when it started, 2017, but it took till 2019 for the shovel to hit the dirt.
And then how long to finish the
The
facility?
facility opened in 2021.
Okay. So you're a little better 4 years into it.
Yeah.
Somewhere into this.
So obviously you didn't read my whole bio. So in 2020, in May of 2020, during the middle of COVID, I was approached by the president of the medical group, and they asked me to step down from leadership. And I've known the guy my entire my entire career there. He was a family practice doctor who was in administration, who had gone, climbed the food chain or climbed the ladder. And I just said to him, I said, he doesn't make those decisions. I mean, he's making a decision that could potentially cause me to leave the health system. And
What was why? What was
there
what was
was,
his motivation?
it's one of those things where, there's my opinion, there's their opinion, and then there's what I think is the truth, which is my opinion. But but anyway, there was basically my passion for what I wanted from that building, I think, pushed people to decide that I just shouldn't be there or be the leader, the lead doctor, even though I was the only one with the vision. This was my career. This was not a job for me. This was my career. Everybody else
Yeah.
that I worked with, great guys, but it was their job. They didn't have the passion. They didn't have the vision. This was all me pulling them, every doc that we worked with. But that being said, they asked me to step down. I told them no. I said, I'm not going to. I said, I don't think I think that this is coming from somewhere else, because you making this decision, they wouldn't give you don't have the keys to the car to make this decision, And what happened is, they made the decision. They actually just removed me from leadership. And then my group wrote a petition, and they didn't like that. And that didn't wake them up that there was a problem. It just upset them that that we were disgruntled. And then in 2021, March of 2021, 9 of us resigned. So we gave, in March of 2021, 9 of us gave our 120-day notice, because in medicine, you can't just walk out. You can't just give 2 weeks. You got to give 3 months so that you can wind down patient care. It also gives you time to figure out what you're going to do in the next life, because it takes about 90 days to get credentialed somewhere else. So, and then in April, so a month later, I came to work and I was fired, and I was terminated with cause, and then walked out by security. My attorney calls it the perp walk, and we and sued. So I was terminated and sued for solicitation of other doctors to leave, and for taking trade secrets, and damages for $56 million. Anyway, so we countersued, and that was in 21. And then they sued the judge, and then the judge recused himself, and the case was put on hold. Then we got a new judge, and then we were supposed to go to trial in August of 23, and July 31st, part of the case got sent back to the appellate court. So it's been in the Court of Appeals since August of 23. And now we're just waiting.
Somebody had a beef against you, but you're not really sure who
I
or
mean,
why.
I think, yeah. I mean, it's definitely something personal. It doesn't
Right?
it doesn't track with, to say. I mean, the reasoning was that or the reason I was given was for being asked to step down, was that your message is stale. And I was like, wait a second, we're building a $70 million building. Why would you do that if my message is stale and I'm not inspiring, or we're not getting patients? And then also the other message was that I don't believe in, I forgot what, something slipped my mind for a second. I'll come back to it. But I didn't believe in value-based care. So basically,
He's giving his cell phone number to his patients, doesn't
what
believe in
was
value-based
happening
care.
was that
Okay.
the system wanted to, and this came up in one meeting, and I was like, I said that in a meeting. And what it was at that meeting, we were told that the health system wanted to reimburse the doctors based on a value-based care metric, which basically mean that they were going to reimburse the doctors less for what they were doing. But the health system was still getting paid fee for service. So they were still getting 100% reimbursement, but they wanted to take a portion of that out and value-based care, basically limit what the doctors got based off a value-based care metric. And I just said to them, because I was the lead of the group, I said, look, I don't support, if you're getting paid or reimbursed on a value-based care model, then yes, we should get reimbursed on a value-based care model. But if you're getting reimbursed on fee for service, and now you want to take out some of that money just because you think it should be value-based care, I said, I just don't agree with that reasoning. That was that I don't support value-based care medicine. Whatever. It was, like I said, I said to the doc, I said, I don't believe what you're saying. I don't think you believe what you're saying. I know you for 20-something years. You've never made a controversial decision in your career. And here you are making a decision that's potentially going to bankrupt the health system, because I'm 30% or 24% of the surgical volume. Anyway, so that's what it was. Yeah.
And so it's still in the appellate court in limbo.
It's one of those things where it's like a buzz. It's like that low hum in the back of your ear that is there, but you deal with it.
Yeah, be nice when that's in your rearview mirror. Yeah. So okay, so then where were you off to then to kind of restart things?
With Ohio Health, which is a much larger health system in the Columbus area. We were originally supposed to do a joint venture with Ohio Health back in the Chillicothe community, but because of all the legal stuff, Ohio Health pulled out, and Ohio Health was getting ready to buy this parcel of land where we were supposed to situate on. And when they pulled out, I realized that if I didn't buy the land, this project was not going to happen. And it just so happens that this 46 acres that I purchased is directly across the street from the old health system. Yeah. So I kind of say it every tongue in cheek every once in a while that they forgot that I was from New York.
I have a couple of thoughts of what you might do for like a billboard facing that health system.
I'll send you some pictures that are very. My patients will send me a picture of that health system's billboard name or signage, and then right across the street is my signage, like in the background. I'll send it to you when we hang up.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. Yeah,
but at the end of the day, the project is really the focus. So, going back to the opening, my focus really has, not that it wasn't always patient first, but now it's really, I'm very interested in leveraging technology to make the safest environment for patient care. And what that means is, so we're building an ambulatory surgery center with a medical office building that right now is scaling at about 90,000 square feet. So it's not a typical ASC is like with medical space is probably about 20 something thousand square feet,
And you're
90,000
doing
square feet.
90,000
So,
square
and it's
feet.
just because we need a lot of
Okay.
services to support the community. So this is not a traditional ambulatory surgery center where it's one service line but it is an ambulatory surgery center. And the goal is how are we safe? How are we efficient? How do we provide an outcome for patients that is better than in a hospital, but also less expensive because it's in a surgery center? And there's no surgery center from Columbus to Kentucky, a 2-hour drive on 23, which is the route that we take. There's no surgery center. There's no facility that you can get non-hospital based imaging. So you can't get a CT or an MRI in that same uh, mileage that doesn't charge hospital rates. So an MRI in a hospital is about $2,000. And, for example, like ProScan, which is a national, I think, but they're about $500. So we're not going to be ProScan, but we're
Interesting.
not going to be hospital rates. But anyway, so, the operating rooms are basically going to be stuff that you've never seen before in terms of what operating rooms look like. It's really the next evolution of the operating room. And it was designed by a neurosurgeon who was at Lenox Hill, Dr. Mangiardi. And he basically got his staff together and said, okay, let's make a list of everything that's wrong with this operating room when it comes to patient safety. And,
Love
this
it.
goes from, how do you prevent infection and how do you prevent falls? And and he basically created this operating room that became what was called the Optimus. And then in Switzerland, and I don't know, this is my understanding of what I was told. If you have a patent that is supported by the government and it doesn't generate revenue for a period of time, that patent can go up for auction. So the Optimus patent went up for auction, and this company that we're working with now called Aspire, and I'll send you all this stuff, but basically they basically took
Yeah, let's see
over.
it.
It's the same people, just under a different name. It really is. It's kind of it's a life goal for me to really create this environment utilizing dry hydrogen peroxide to kill viruses. And there's a company out there called Synexis that they have this dry hydrogen peroxide machines that either go in your HVAC system or in your room. I have them in all the bedrooms in my kids' rooms, but it kills viruses, it kills mold, kills bacteria. They've done studies where employees have less sick days that have this in their environment. College kids that have this in their dorm miss less class. They've shown to decrease surgical site infections with this in the room. So it's really a very advanced technology. It's not an air purifier. It really just kills these things. And mold is something that delays recovery. So you hear about these stories where kids are hacking up and they don't know what it is, and then they find black mold behind the sheetrock or something. But
Yeah.
it's one of those technologies that when deployed really changes the world. It's using all these things together to make it safe.
Does that include just some of the advances in the operating rooms? Does that
Yeah,
include some
yes. Yeah,
robotic
so I do
surgery as well?
robotic hips, knees, and shoulders. Our spine surgeon uses robotics. Our general surgeon is a big Da Vinci, which is another robot. So we'll have the latest technology on that front. And so that's the ASC. That's the first part of the project. Also on the property is what I call the hospitality. So a hotel that'll support the ASC. It'll have rooms that'll be stay suites. Patients who can't go home but don't need to be in a hospital have a place that they can be monitored while they recover. And then also for families that come from out of town, they'll have a place to stay on the property. And then there's no restaurants along that area either, so food. And then there's space for a micro hospital to connect to the ambulatory surgery center. And then the other 20 acres is for the community. So in Chillicothe, there's a baseball team called the Chillicothe Paints. They're a wood bat baseball team. So some of these kids go on and play professional baseball, working out through this league. But we'll build a 1,500 hard seat stadium for them, with a 75,000 square foot community center, and then 3 ball fields for multi-use for soccer, lacrosse. So it's
Great.
a vision we're doing, these things. So, um, it's in a township. So the township can't charge an income tax, but we can develop
Hmm.
a JED, or a joint economic development. This is in Ohio, where we could collect the income tax from the people who work there. So 2%. A portion of that goes to the township. A portion of that goes to the city, because that JED has to be supported by an entity that can charge an income tax. So and there's no
Okay.
JED in the
Okay.
county. So we'll be the first JED in the county. And then, we have a TIF for infrastructure. So it's a combination of not only taking care of the patients, but also providing for young people and older people who want to be active in the community center, but also to support the school system in that
Yeah.
township. And it's not,
Yeah.
it's part of Appalachia, Ohio. It's not like a city. It's really in a rural part of the state.
Okay. So where in the project is everything? How far along?
We are just the JED should be approved this month. So once the JED is approved,
Okay.
and the TIF, then we'll be able to um, offer the development bonds for the infrastructure. And then we're right now we're in the development of the design of the building. So we hope to break ground on the infrastructure by the end of the year, and then on the building the beginning of next year, and then open in 27.
That the
ASCMOB.
building is the ASC. Okay. Okay. So the ASC in 2027 sounds, that's got to be really cool to see, to be like an integral part of all the planning and the dream and the vision
Well,
of this.
yeah, and it goes back to what we talked about before. I mean, when I was talking about an orthopedic specialty hospital for the previous health system, it's because it's what I felt was the right thing to do for the community. It was, I'm not going to say it was just my vision, but it was my passion, and they just didn't get that, and not that they didn't realize it, but they're not doing well. It's just how it is. But I
Yep.
just
Little
took my
karma,
passion
maybe.
and moved it, 100 feet across the road, and it'll accomplish this.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's also, I mean, not to blow smoke, but that's pretty impressive on your side, because it sounds like you kind of got screwed over at that kind of guy. It sounds like you got screwed over for whatever reason at the old place, and to keep that fire burning, to really then say, hey, listen, there's a lot more that I want to do, and I'm not going to be, dampened by
Yeah. No, I
other
mean,
people.
yeah,
That's
it's one
what.
of those things where it would be, I mean, it'd be a lot easier just to pack up shop, and I could just do what I'm doing now. I feel like I'm very successful in what I do, but it's not about that. It's about what we talked about in the beginning. It's about, how do you give back? It's just doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I feel like we're,
Yeah.
as a society, we're just missing some things when it comes to healthcare. And if we create this, not that if, when we create this model and people come and see that it can be done and it's not a gazillion dollars, that it may
Yeah.
be the right way to do certain things as we go forward, especially with all these that we just can't control.
Yeah.
My biggest thing is when I talk to people, when we talk about infection, is we do the same thing the same way every time. And a portion of our patients still get infection. And, a lot of that has to do with
Hmm.
stuff that we don't control in the operating room. That's the atmosphere. We just don't do anything to, uh, you know, purify where we're working. It's, we try not to open doors, and we try to have these positive pressure rooms where the air blows out and nothing blows in, but
Hmm.
there's still contamination all over the place. So if you can have this dry hydrogen peroxide flowing through the room, maybe it does decrease that risk. It's not like it's a huge risk, but it's devastating when you get an infection after a total joint. I mean, it is. Infection anytime is bad. I mean, just think about it. When you get a cold, it ruins your life for that day and a half. Imagine getting something that's a draining wound that you just can't, you got to change the dressing every day, soils your sheets, your clothes, and you're just dealing with that. It changes people's lives. It puts them in a bad spot, puts their family in a bad spot. They miss work. It changes them economically. It's like
Yeah.
an entire, if you think about your own world, it changes your world. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So
derailing.
if we could figure out a way to do a better job, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, for sure. Talk to me about some of the ways that you're helping mentor some of the younger generation coming up through the ranks and learning about, learning about the proper way to run an OR and proper way to
Yeah,
help
I
your
mean,
patients
I've
and
been
heal
fortunate. I don't really have residents, but I do have students that come in. I have a bunch of students that when I first started were high school students, and now they're orthopedic surgeons. I mean, Yeah. So,
Oh, that's awesome. Is there a medical
well, I
school
mean,
anywhere near you guys?
Ohio has a bunch, in Columbus, I should say,
Okay.
Ohio,
How far away
we're
from
about an
Columbus are
hour.
you?
I practice in Columbus too
Okay, not
now.
that far.
But the point being that these high school kids, they come in not knowing what they want to do. And then, like I said, I had one kid, Peyton Bettine, he's a orthopedic surgeon, I think in Louisiana. I forget where he's at. But anyway, he's a foot and ankle, but he was an engineer at Ohio State. And then he stayed and went to med school. And every summer he would come home and work with us. And, I wanted him to come back and actually partner with us, but he decided to stay in the South. It's stuff like that, where people spend time with you and you don't realize that you rub off on them in a positive way. And the way that I looked at George Denoto, who was the chief resident who told that general surgeon that I was going to be a successful surgeon, not a successful dermatologist. I mean, I feel like maybe that's how they look at me. And that's worth everything.
Yeah. What you got a lot on your plate. What do you do to burn off steam,
So I get up at
blow it all off?
tomorrow. I get up at 2 o'clock. 2 a.m., work out for
AM?
3 hours, and that's how I burn. That's how I burn off that's how I start my day with an empty tank, so that I'm not stressed. I mean, I'm fortunate. I have two young girls, 9 and 12, so they keep me busy as well.
Good ages.
You and I tried to connect last week, and you had something with your daughter, and I before you canceled. I canceled because my daughter was doing a cheer event and I hadn't been to any, but she was doing the big one on like the high school field. So I was like, I got to go to that. Um, but
You gotta get
I
to there,
mean,
yeah.
y- y- I always,
What's your
well,
workout
I
for
spend an
three
hour and a half
hours?
doing cardio. So that and an hour, you know, training weights and stuff. And I'll do like a 3 day routine. I'll tell you, I tell people I'm the most unhealthiest healthy person you'll ever meet. I get very little sleep. I work out way more than I should. It's probably borderline. I'm afraid one day my wife's going to be like, why is the lights on downstairs? And then like, if, find me, slumped over on the elliptical.
Mm,
And then I don't eat like protein bars and like processed crap, but it's the easiest thing for me to eat. So I tell people I'm the
yeah.
most unhealthiest healthy person. So, but between that and trying to be there for my patients as much as I can, and then obviously, I want to be there for my family as much. And we talk about this all the time. Or recently there was a quote that I posted on LinkedIn that the only people who remember, your patients won't remember that you stayed late for them, but your kids will. Yeah, and
Your
I
kids
still,
will. Yeah. So how do you manage that? You have a lot going on. How are you managing? I mean, you got your working out, you got your practice, but you have this massive project that you're working on, two girls, family, like, we all have busy days and there's only so many hours a day. How do you manage that?
I don't know.
Nose to
I
the
wake up,
grindstone?
I know cap the stuff I have to do, and then the other stuff as it comes up, I just figure it out. Before this, my neighbor, I took care of him. He tore his Achilles, so I fixed it. He called me, he said, "My wife thinks I have a blood clot." So I'm like, "Okay, I'll come over right now." And then so I go over there. I'm like, "It's not a blood clot." And then I'm getting ready for tomorrow. And then my wife calls me and says, "Hey, can you meet me and pick up Libby? She needs to get." And so then I'm like, "Okay, well, I got to be on this call at 7 o'clock." So it's just things come up and you start juggling, and yeah, it's just,
You handle it.
I mean, I think at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's just, um, you, you to be for me to be satisfied or happy. I have to feel like I've done as much as I could that day. Like we talked about emptying the tank. It's really just trying to, not, I'm not going crazy. I don't think I'm not, operating like I'm half asleep. I mean, I don't drink coffee. Yeah. I mean,
Me
I don't
neither.
need it. I enjoy what I do, and that gets me inspired. And, even, um, 4 months ago, I switched my approach to total hips. So I was a traditional going from posterior, did it for 25 years. And I reached out to somebody who did an anterior hip that I respected, and he came to town and he took me through, and I've been doing them ever since. And it's just, when I started robotics in 2017, same thing. It was just like a reinvigoration of what I'm doing.
Do you find that it's hard? I mean, the old adage is you teach an old dog new tricks. Is it hard to say, okay, you know what? how do I ask? Is it hard to kind of keep an open mind? You're doing a certain procedure, a certain way for 25 years. You're like,
Yeah.
I mean, you have an open mind, but is that's sometimes got to be hard, especially with the robotics
Yeah.
coming in, right? Like,
Well,
how do you
I just,
trust it,
for robotics,
right?
for me, it's just a lot of more objective data. Like I tell my patients, I'm going to, a patient comes in and their leg's not fully straight and they have an angle to it. I'm like, we're going to get this CAT scan and we're going to take this information, we're going to put it in the computer, and I'm going to be able to tell what your angle is exactly. And then when I'm going to do this operation on the computer and I'm going to correct that angle, I'm going to tell you what we're going to correct it to. And then we're going to take that plan and we're going to execute that plan on your knee. And it's when you walk into a family and you said, yeah, your husband's knee was bent at 20 degrees. It didn't go past 20 degrees. Now it goes to 0. They kind of understand that, So when you
Yeah,
put objective numbers to it, it it works. And I mean, I'm not saying I'm open minded to everything, but I am set in my ways. But if it makes sense, I'll try.
yeah. So one of the things that I always talk about is, as we talked about in my financial planning practice works, so a lot of physicians, healthcare professionals, and PAs, RNs and LPNs and physicians especially view money as like a taboo topic, and because there's no training in med school or undergrad or fellowships or anything. It's just, go out in the world, heal your patients, and then your finances take a back burner. Along your way, did you have some guidance or a wingman or someone to help you with some financial decisions? You got a family, young family now. Like, did you have a
So
wingman
I've,
along the way?
and I'm not saying this is right or wrong. So for the last 25 years, I've had the same financial planner. And what I tell,
Hmm.
and I joke with him and I joke with other people. I said, I don't know if he's doing a good job or a bad job. I'm not bankrupt. And there's, I don't look at money as taboo. I don't really, it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's like it's there. I mean, I'm very fortunate that because of volume, I'm very successful, I can't say that I'm not somebody who, there are orthopedic surgeons out there who can, work, 2 or 3 days a week and because they have other ancillary incomes, but as an employed physician, I only make what I work. And like I said, I mean, 2007, the market went crash or whatever, I don't know if it's a crash. I think people call it a crash. But, I mean,
Yeah.
shit was bad. COVID, it was like, this one guy that I've worked with has just gotten me through. But he's also, the other thing he's introduced me to other opportunities in kind of startup medical companies. The one that he
Hmm.
introduced me to, which hasn't been financially successful, but it is a great product, is what you talked about in terms of bone healing. There was a company out there that he introduced me to them to invest their technologies out of Ohio State. And I looked at that and I said, that technology would be great if it works the way you're saying, if we put it in the shoulder to help the rotator cuff heal to the bone. And they're like, well, that makes sense. And they created this patch that is made up of a suture material, but it allows the cells to migrate from the bone to the tendon and basically heals with a bone tendon, the rotator cuff. And I don't want to get too technical, but the re-tear rate hasn't changed in 30 years because we're great at how we do the surgery. We're just not great at the biology. And this has
So is in a rotator, there's a
yeah.
high
So yeah,
percentage that you could
yeah.
re-tear
There's
it?
20% is probably at minimum the standard, and even higher for bigger tears. But this material, so we took this material and we we did an animal study, a sheep study, which is standard in rotator cuffs for the industry. And in sheep that had this patch as part of their repair, had a stronger, they pulled it, they sacrificed the sheep at 6 weeks and then they pull on the repair and it was 34% stronger at 6 weeks compared to those without. And they sacrificed at 12 weeks and it was 74% stronger at 12 weeks than those without. And then there's an orthopedic surgeon out of Indiana, Brian Badman, who did a study where he basically did you can't sacrifice humans. It's frowned upon. Yeah. But he did a
Probably
study
a
where
good
he did a
thing.
prospective randomized study. So he basically mixed up his patients and mixed up the treatment and then basically looked at the results. And uh, he had a 7% re-tear rate in patients who had this patch and a 50% re-tear rate in patients who didn't have this patch. Really, and under the microscope, it does show what it looks like when the body before it tears, because before it heals with a scar, now it actually heals with bone spicules and Sharpie fibers and stuff that we eat. Yeah. So but
Interesting.
they introduced me to this he introduced me to this company, and this company, I said, well, that's great product. And I invested in the product.
Yeah.
But then I said, it would be better. It would be great here. And then, they do it in wound care and stuff like that. So it's one of those products that, and then through, those things, I've been fortunate enough that people approach me and ask me my opinion. If it's something that I'm interested, I'll invest in. And, startups, it's like a 15,
Yeah.
20-year return. It's not like, so, my kids will
Yeah.
be fine. I hope. Yeah, exactly.
It's a long-term play for sure. For sure. Listen, this has been
I
great.
appreciate.
I thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find
So
find
you
out more
can go to
information about you?
LinkedIn. I mean that's probably the
Okay.
best because I'm very. That's where I'm kind of. I do all my own posts on there. So and there's and Adrienne Townsend, who you spoke about before. I met her through LinkedIn, and there's like a whole orthopedic community that communicates about things that you and I talked about just now, and then other things that you and I touched on before. But that's it. And then if you go to my website, cohenorthopedic.com, it's down right now, but it'll be up at the end of the month.
Okay. Well, sounds good. Well, you got to keep me
I
abreast
will.
of the project. I'll put your profile link in
And
in the
I'm gonna
description.
send you those technologies. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I would love to see that. I'd love to see like
But yeah, you're
the
gonna like it.
dream operating room. But this has been great conversation. I thank you so much. And so everybody else, this is we're going to wrap up. Just remember, when it comes to your financial planning, as with everything, the Boy Scouts have a saying: "Is the time to have the map is before you enter the woods." So that works in retirement planning and financial planning and most things in life. So thank
Thanks,
you, and
Eric.
we're going to sign off.